So I was born in Big Rapids, Michigan. Grandpa, he'd lay down on the floor with me and he would go over what had happened that day in the war. So my grandfather really taught me to read before I went to school.
He's always been very communicative and passionate, really. Very clear about his values and right and wrong and why. And engaged, like super engaged, especially civically.
My dad, the one thing about him was his involvement in just teachers and education.
I always enjoyed teaching in my hometown. I wasn't a rookie. I didn't have discipline problems with the students in my classroom. They knew that I was consistent in who I was and what I expected out of them.
When he would retell stories about his teaching days and coaching football, that all had a huge influence on me because it was real. It was a relationship that he built with his players, with his teachers, that impressed me.
Michigan had a collective bargaining law, and I was on the negotiating team.
And I knew he was an activist as a young person.
The teachers, they just said, look, you've got a lot of good teachers here. There are some teachers that aren't as good as others. If you want to evaluate them, you ought to evaluate them. If you want to increase expectations, you ought to. But you've got some really good teachers, and they deserve to be paid more than you're paying them.
And he always would say, hey, whatever you want to do, you can always teach. You can always teach. We need good teachers. And then come to find out, I knew that he supported teachers, that he was advocate for them, lobbied for them.
I mean, he taught civics and people would say to us when we would be in Big Rapids, I had your dad as a teacher. He's the best teacher I ever had. That was a comment, or he was my coach and he was the best coach I ever had. Most caring, knew his athletes, knew his students, just really took time to listen to people and to try to get them to see things that he saw. Because if it was important, then everybody should know about it.
When I was promoted to an assistant principal position, I called him that day and I said, thank you for continuing to push me in the area of leadership for students and teachers. And it's made all the difference.
A guy who was on one of the bank boards and owned the biggest funeral home in town came out and essentially said to me, Morris, you have a future here, but you really don't have a future if you're going to insist upon being this aggressive. And I said, well, I teach government economics, and if you're telling me that if I feel strongly about something, I don't have my rights to participate about that, I guess I'm never going to give those up.
Yeah, he was always really good at telling me why he did what he did in terms that I could understand even as a kid.
So if I stay here, people of your economic background and clout and power in this town are not going to like me. So I'm probably not going to move up to be the superintendent or principal someday. Thanks for telling me that, because I'm not going to stay here under those kinds of circumstances. I guess I'm going to go to work for the MEA, and we'll see what happens.
And he worked more and more. He was gone. He just worked all the time. He worked so hard. But he still managed to make, I'm not sure he missed any of my games, really.
So I worked in the metropolitan area of Michigan the first 2 or 3 years of collective bargaining. And then I went and worked for the NEA, the National Education Association. And I was a negotiation specialist.
He definitely had a mission for sure. Yeah, and I think I probably learned a whole bunch of stuff from him that it's like my wallpaper, right? I just don't even see it. I take it completely for granted. Like the fact that you can and should find a job that lights you up, and that you can and should find a job where at the end of the day the world is a better place because you went to work.
On an athletic level and on an academic level, I had really good support. Mom was great. Mom was real, loving mom, took care of me. But he was that fire and brimstone when he had to be, but he was also soft too, And as a young man, a tough dad in terms of expectations is really good.
I would say that the more it was very clear that the more teachers' economic circumstances improved, the more their self-image improved.
I didn't know exactly what he did, but I knew he was important. And the reason why is because the way people would react to him when they meet him. And I was like, he knows some people, he's an important guy. Then I started asking more questions and saying, hey, what do you do? What do you do? I know that he worked a lot. He worked a lot, I remember him working on Saturdays, arbitration. He used to always say this word, I didn't know what the hell arbitration. I was like, what's arbitration? What is that?
You could see where, a lot of times you could see where progress was occurring. You were making progress for the students and for the teachers.
It wasn't about WEAC. It was about the teachers and the kids. Always about the kids.
So you could feel good that you were economically helping them come to a better lifestyle, a lifestyle that was more reflective of what they were worth if they were a competent teacher.
I think somebody who accomplished as much as he did professionally could have had a much bigger ego stake. But he was who he was no matter what he was doing. And I always really admired that about him.
And that over time, schools attracted more and more higher quality, better teachers to work, where there was some relationship between how they were treated and what they were paid and what kind of job they did.
I think he really had fun at that job, but it almost killed him, for sure. And then when he left, I was so surprised and I admired the way he left. He left before he had to, and he left partly because he wanted to have more life. And then he got married to Chrissy, and that was perhaps the best thing that ever happened to him. And he's the most important person on the planet for me. I mean, my kids, certainly, and my wife, obviously, and Chrissy and my mom. But if there was one person that I had to call, it would definitely be Morris.
And now it's like he sees most of his creation. The same lessons that he taught me, perseverance, high expectations, he passed that on to my son. My son is a beneficiary of his leadership. My daughters are a beneficiary of his leadership. I am. My sister is. It's just something about my dad's presence, being stern, but at the same time, he was very loving. You understood behind that stern, there was love, tough love there.
Having him as a dad, oh my God, it's like winning the lottery, really.